Good day, everyone. Welcome to our week 8 class for Purposive Communication. So, in this video, I'll be discussing with you the topic about communication for work purposes. So, specifically, this lesson would help you manifest understanding on how to obtain, provide, and disseminate information appropriately and effectively. Also, it would help you develop your vital communication skills, especially when you enter the workplace soon, right? And to formulate and analyze various arguments logically. So let's get this started. First off, you might be wondering, what is workplace communication? So, from the name itself, that would already give you a hint of what it is. It's a communication that is being used, especially in the workplace. But technically, it is defined as the process of exchanging information, both verbal and nonverbal, within an organization. And when we talk about verbal, that means that that's your spoken communication that you exchange with your colleagues, with your administrators, with your employers, right? Now, that also include the written communication that is being cascaded within the organization. Now, why is effective workplace communication important? Number one reason is that it ensures that organizational objectives are achieved. You have to understand that if you belong to a certain company or organization, it's automatic that you have a company's vision and mission, right? So if you do not have an effective communication in there, you cannot be on the same page. Imagine that you are in a company wherein you and your colleagues do not understand each other. Administrators and staff do not understand each other. Do you think they can row in the same boat? Definitely not. They cannot achieve the company's goal if that is the case. Second, it increases productivity and efficiency. If you feel that you matter, that your voice is heard, that if you have complaints, they are working about it, they're responding toward it, what would you feel? Of course, you would feel happy about it, and you definitely would try to do your best in the job that is given to you. And you will become efficient, you will be effective, and you will be productive, right? So that's one of the important effects of having effective communication in workplace. Third, communication gaps will be avoided. What is communication gap? That happens when there is misunderstanding along the way. So if there is effective communication, misunderstanding can be avoided. People will have what we call unity within the same organization. And of course, as a whole, there is what we call as organizational benefits from it. First, like I said, it improves your productivity. Second, it increases the morale of the certain company. For example, you try to imagine that there is a certain company that a lot of employees there are not working with each other very well. They're even rallying against their company. Do you think you would look up to that certain company? Definitely no, right? So effective communication can definitely affect the morale, the reputation of a certain company. Next, higher employee job satisfaction. It's self-explanatory that if there is effective communication taking place, employee will be satisfied. And as a result, it will reduce turnover rates. What is turnover rates? Well, it is defined as the percentage of employees stopping or quitting from their work over a certain period of time. In other words, if there is effective communication taking place in a certain company, employees will feel that they are worthy, that they are important, and so they will not try to look for another job. They will not stop from working, right? Instead, they will do their best for the company's success. Okay, next, greater trust in management is very important. If there is effective communication, employees will put their loyalty and trust to their administrators because they know for matter of fact that their employees are trying to achieve the company's goal without compromising the benefits of the employees at the same time. So if there is effective communication, people will trust their management, and of course, people will try strive and be more productive, like I have mentioned earlier. There's also stronger teamwork, increased business understanding, and of course higher employee engagement. Like I said, they will be participating in every activity that the company is initiating, and stronger corporate culture. So these are the organizational benefits of effective communication in workplace. Now, how can we go about it? How can we communicate effectively in a certain workplace? First, we as an individual, we should strive to be a good person inside the company. How? We should try to value all individuals. You have to treat them with respect. If we show respect to that person, they're gonna respect us too, right? If we show courtesy and sensitivity, they're gonna pay it back to us. So if there is respect among each individual inside the company, then there is harmony, right? So that's one of the ways on how to communicate effectively in a workplace. Next, we have to recognize cultural differences. We also have to recognize that we all come from different backgrounds, from different walks of life, from different culture. Even though, for example, we just live in the same country, but we do have different cultural differences. We might be coming from different provinces. We have different practices at home and different practices at each province. So if we recognize it, we would be open to different perspectives of people. Like, we are not shutting down ourselves with our own opinions. We try to listen to them. And if we try to listen to them, they would also listen to us. And if there is that aspect of communication, well, it would be a success. It will be an effective form of communication then. Next, communicate in a way to develop and maintain positive relationships, trust, and confidence. Avoid gossips. Okay? If there is someone whom you have a complaint with, it is really good if you try to do it in a private way, in a confidential way. By that, you will earn the trust of that person, and you will build a positive relationship at the end of the day. Okay, next, we have to make an effort to use basic strategies to overcome communication barriers. What are those basic strategies? Just simply talking it out, okay? Listening and voicing out your perspective and compromising. Sometimes that's very important, okay? And of course, when we are verbally communicating, we also have to remind ourselves that we have to speak clearly and we have to listen carefully to ensure information is understood. Like, you have to speak clearly and make sure that the other person understands you, like you are on the same pace. And you also have to listen. Listening is very important. It's different from hearing, because hearing are just, you recognize that there are sounds around you, there are music around you. That's just hearing. But here, take note, the word used was listening. Listening carefully is very important, because if you listen, there's comprehension. When there is comprehension, there is understanding. When there is understanding, there is application. And when there is application, there is also what we call as effective communication, right? So the rule is 80-20. What is 80 and 20? 80%, if you're talking, you listen. 20% to speak. It's better to listen first to the side of the other person before you talk, before you express your own sentiments. Because maybe along the way, there is just misunderstanding. Both of you got misunderstanding. So you have to clarify everything. You have to listen to that person's point of view as well, because maybe that person is right after all. Okay. And it's okay also to admit that we do make mistakes. We have to accept that we are vulnerable. You know what I'm saying? So you have to listen, because by listening, you will be able to realize, I'm really made a mistake. And so you give yourself a chance to ask apologies to the person whom you have made mistake on. Okay, so yeah, those are just simple and basic that we have learned that even from our elementary days. But sometimes we forget those basic tenets of life. Okay, next, ask questions and confirm the meaning of information to avoid misunderstanding. So if you are the one who's relaying the information, it is your responsibility to make sure that the other party, the other person understands you. How can you do that? Well, from time to time, you might ask, are you following me? Do you get what I mean? Or you can probably ask questions to that person to make sure that that person gets your point. Okay, again, if you are the one who initiated that communication, it is your prime responsibility to make sure that the other person gets your message effectively. Okay, so you ask question and you confirm the meaning of information. And if you are also the one who is listening, confirm it. Do not be shy to ask. It's better to ask before doing something that you are not asked for at the end of the day. You know what I'm saying? Okay. Next, we have to let others talk. This is what I said earlier. A conversation is a two-way event at a minimum. It will never be called a conversation if you're just talking to yourself again and again. So you have to listen and you have to talk and listen. It's mutual understanding between the two people talking with each other. Let the person talk. It's very important. Okay, next, engage in difficult conversations when necessary. Not saying something to avoid a difficult conversation usually makes things worse. Or here's another thing. This usually happens in a workplace. A lot of people just have the tendency of going away out of the scene. Okay, but at the without clarifying things, without confronting that person. Okay, confronting that person and engaging in difficult conversation is better than you just keep it in among yourself. You keep it with yourself, but then at the end of the day, you try to gossip that person with other people in the company. And if that happens, there's a tendency that you are creating faction or groups in a certain company, and we don't want that. A certain company should be on the same page. They should not be divided, because if the company is divided, again, the goal will not be achieved. So do not be a person who would try to initiate war inside the company. Okay, instead, if there is a person whom you have a complaint with, or if there is a person whom you think you have always a misunderstanding, why not take time and be brave enough to talk to that person in private? Remember, you have to talk to that person in private, and do not avoid ranting in social media. That will not help you. It will just make matters worse. Okay, so that's it. Also, we have to bear in mind that we have to ensure that our tone is open and non-confrontational and encourage feedback. A while ago, I said you confront. Yeah, confront privately. But again, go back to the next bullet. It says here, you have to make sure that your tone, your delivery is non-confrontational. You are not asking for a fight. Okay? Instead, you're giving a hint to the other person that you are there because you want to settle whatever conflict you have had, right? And you have to be there not just to fight against that person, but you want to win back the relationship between you and that person. At the end of the day, we have to build positive relationships, because if we are not building positive relationships, we will not have peace of mind. Again, it goes back to us. It's very important. Of course, you cannot sleep very well if you think there are people whom you don't have good relationships with. You know what I'm saying? And also, you have to encourage feedback. If you have said something, ask also the person, the side of the other person. What is her opinion about what you have said? Okay? And if that person pinpointed your mistakes, be vulnerable enough to evaluate yourself. You can ask yourself, which part did I made a mistake on? And if you have realized that you made a mistake on that aspect, be brave enough to acknowledge that you really made a mistake. We all make mistakes. We all do, because we are just imperfect. Okay? So that's it. Next, when we're verbally communicating, we also have to use appropriate language in the workplace. There's what we call a shared language in the workplace. What do we mean by shared language? If you're a certain company, you do have certain terms, jargons that you are using, and of course, phrases or words that is being used in a certain company. So if you're new to that company, you try to learn that shared language that you do have in a certain company. Through that, you will be able to be you can develop good relationship with the other people inside your company, because you are on the right page, on the same page. Okay, next, obtain information from available sources. In obtaining information, dear, you also have to go back to the fact, is that source reliable enough? Go back to the question, is that source credible enough? Okay, so you should not disseminate information that do not have actually a good source. You know what I'm saying? Next, we have to voice out one's views and argue logically. Okay, this is what I'm telling you a while ago, class, that if we do also have a point, we should voice it out. But again, make sure that your tone is non-confrontational. Deliver it in a way that you are not asking for a fight. And you have to argue logically. I am not saying that you will not argue. Okay, all right. You can argue, but take note, the word here is logically, meaning your argument is founded on facts, on credible sources. Okay, now how can we argue logically? First, examine an issue by doing relevant research. This is what I'm telling you. You have to research about it so that you can have a well-founded argument. Okay, next, choose the side you would like to support. Okay, which side are you going to support? And of course, in choosing the side that you would like to support, you should not be subjective, but rather you should be objective when you are choosing the side that you would like to support. Next, formulate your arguments by identifying the general subject and the specific focus or controlling idea. This is very important, that you formulate your arguments very well. Okay, you identify the subject, and then what are the other corresponding details that would help you in formulating your argument. You know, arguing logically is very important in a certain company, because from time to time, companies are making or deliberating difficult decisions for the company's sake. So if you think that in a certain company there are a lot of voices, there are a lot of opinions, what should you do? So these are the tips that you should do. Okay, examine an issue by doing relevant research, choose the side that you'd like to support, identify the general subject, and of course, we also have this: present your arguments and their corresponding evidence. Take note, it should be evidence based, not just emotion based. Next, listen to your opponent's arguments and weigh their evidence. Again, you have to listen because maybe they also did their research and their research is well founded as well. Okay, and then weigh their evidence. Okay, and you try to analyze which one is weighty. Okay, next, make a summary of the key arguments. So those are the ways on how we can argue logically in a certain company. Again, I'm not saying that in a certain company you should avoid arguing. Argue logically and non-confrontational. Okay, so that's it. Next, we have this one: when communicating through email or other written communication, what are the things that we need to bear in mind? First, we have to always read. For example, of course, every day if you're working, you will be receiving tons of emails. Sometimes it's very tiring that you're going to read everything in detail, you might say to yourself. But again, it's part of your job. So you have to always reread an email before sending to check spelling, grammar, and tone. Okay? Do not murder the names of the people whom you are sending the email to. Of course, check the grammar because it goes back to it reflects to your company and to you as the letter sender as well. And you have to make sure that your tone is not authoritative or bossy. Ensure that the content of the email is relevant and has an appropriate subject heading. When you're writing an email, make sure that on the part where it requires you to write the subject or the RE, you have to really type in what is the content of the email. You have to write there the heading. It's very important because, people in the workplace are so busy, right? They have lots of work. At least you are helping them by giving them a clue what your letter is about if you are placing your subject heading over there. Next, ensure that contact details are attached or appended to the email so that those reading it can contact the sender if required. So contact details can be email address or phone numbers or fax numbers if that is applicable. Whatever applicable to your company, you have to make sure that is attached to the email. Okay, we have to again be polite, concise, use valid points, and avoid lengthy ramblings. Be concise, be succinct when you are having your written communication. Avoid flowery words. This is not literature, poem, for example, or storytelling thing. Limit your email to 3 paragraphs as much as possible. I'm not saying that you can go beyond that, but if there is a way for you to just make it short and direct to the point, do it. Avoid lengthy and rambling words. Okay, next, don't CC the email to anyone to whom it is not relevant. Again, we say CC carbon copy or courtesy copy. So it's very important that you do not CC the email to other persons because that might be confidential or private. So if that happens, like when you CC the other person who is not actually concerned, then the possibility with that, you will be leaking out some confidential information to people that are not concerned. Avoid using email to discuss confidential information. So what will you do? Instead, you take time. You have to have a schedule in mind to talk to that person in private. Now, how to communicate with clients and customers. This is also another aspect that we're doing when we are in the workplace. First, speak clearly and accurately. Make sure that our customers and clients understand us very well. Be open and non-judgmental. Do not based on how the person looks, on how they appears, because at the end of the day, we cannot judge the book by its cover. That's a cliche already, right? But again, you should not be judgmental to other person. Okay. Be respectful of your customers' feelings. You can show respect to your customers' feelings by addressing them with their titles, if they are doctors, and even if they do not hold a certain position in a certain company or a certain position in the society, but you can show respect to them by just saying Miss or simply saying Mister, right? That's also a simple way of showing respect to their feelings. Use the customer's name as possible too. Okay, do not use other names. Okay, if you're using the customer's name, that would give them an impression that you know them. And if they have that impression that you know them, they would say, oh, this person values me as a customer, so I would definitely be having business with this company. So that's very important. And of course, we have to unlearn your own bad habits. If you think and if you have received a feedback that you are this, you are that, that you have that attitude thing, you try to eliminate it. It's not it's not an overnight work. It takes time. Okay, but if you try to unlearn it, definitely at the end of the day you can achieve it. At the end of the day, you have the control of your life. If you do not want that habit to reoccur, then try to stop it, eliminate it one at a time. Okay, be aware of nonverbal messages, your gestures. Be aware of that. In psychology, they would say that if you are in front of a customers, do not do this, right? Do not put your arms over each other. Instead, you should be like open, right? That's why if you are in a department store, you would be noticing that the salespersons are not pointing. They were not using this when they are communicating. When you're asking some direction, they're not doing this. Instead, they are encouraged to do this, an open hand. Okay, so those are just simple signs, gestures, but they do matter. Okay, right. Next, we have to be interested in people. We should show concern to them, because again, if we are showing concern to them, we would be able to earn their respect as well. Ask questions and be open to feedback. Feedbacks are very important. They would fill in our rooms for improvement. Okay, now that is all for our lesson. Here are my references. But before we end this lesson, let me just recap everything. We have talked about the different ways and how we can argue logically. We also have learned about how to communicate verbally and how to communicate with clients and customers. So all those tips that I have given you, it's very essential that we should try to develop them as early as possible, so that when we are already in our workplace, we will not be able to have a 360-degree turn of our attitude. You know what I'm saying? Okay, so that ends our week 8 class. I hope you have learned something, and keep safe, and I'll see you next week.